Thanks for clicking on the Travel is Real channel. Enjoy this episode highlight and remember to like and do work on that subscribe button. In this segment, Brian discusses his wild story which took place in Mongolia. It's an experience which no traveler should ever have to endure, yet it's an occurrence that could easily happen to anyone. This tale is not for the timid. Well, fortunately, you decided to get out of that.
That's it.
And take some me time.
Yep.
Take some Brian time.
Yep. Half a year into me time.
Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, let's get into it.
Let's get into it.
So you've been into a pretty unique country.
Yeah.
That I've only met a few people in Asia and on my travels that have been to this country.
It's a pretty special country. Very special to my heart. Very off the beaten path.
I'd say. Yeah, I always, whenever somebody goes to this country, I'm like, oh, man, fucking tell me about it.
Yeah. And sometimes it's hard to find other people that have been there.
Yeah. So where'd you go?
Mongolia. For those who don't know, sandwiched in between Russia and China. It's out there.
So just right off the bat, before we get into this fucking wild story that you experienced, we're at the forefront of in Mongolia.
Yeah.
What was something that you just thought was super special?
Oh, definitely the nomadic lifestyle.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really something special because Mongolians are the definition of nomadic people.
Yeah.
You know, they pack up it's called a yurt or a gear, depending on how you've learned it, and it's this hut, and depending on the season, they get up, they take down their whole house, they put it on their horse or their reindeer or their camel, because it's extremely diverse.
Horse, reindeer.
Yep, reindeer.
Or camel.
Yep, that's it. Because if you think of Mongolia, in the south, you have the Gobi Desert. So you got your camels. In the north, you're on the Siberian border, where it's cold as balls. And it was snowing only a couple months ago. And up there, that's where you have the reindeer. So whatever animal, whatever part you're in, is going to dictate your animal. And they get on, they put their stuff on the horse, whatever animal it may be, and they move with the seasons, start up their new life again on the other side. And I think that's really nomadic when you're switching your house every couple months.
So while you were there,
Yep.
you had quite the experience.
Yeah.
Quite the
incident.
the wild incident. Yeah, that's a good one. It's literally an incident.
Yeah.
Yeah, can you kind of tell me about that?
Yeah, so just the quick story. I landed in Ulaanbaatar, which is the capital of Mongolia, and met some people from the hostel. We had a group of about 7 people. We rented a van, and we lived in a van for a month, just traveling all throughout Mongolia.
That's sick.
Pretty fun times in that van. It was like a Russian tank from the 1970s. And about maybe 18, 19 days in, it was actually on the 4th of July. It was a pretty shitty way to start your 4th of July. But
which is American Independence Day for non-Americans.
Thank you. Yeah, and we were doing a barbecue, as you do on the 4th of July.
Seems appropriate.
Yep. And there was this girl in our group, and she was from Italy. Her English was not very good, and I remember she told me, as me and my buddy Matt, we fired up the grill, she said she was going for a run. So off she goes for a run. She comes back maybe 10 minutes later, really out of breath. And this girl was in really good shape. She was always running. It was really weird to see her coming back so quickly and so out of breath. And so she comes up and she's just babbling about a cow. It's something about a cow and a car. And I came to the conclusion that a car hit a cow, and the cow was dead or bleeding or something. And so I tried to tell her, I'm sorry about the cow, but I mean, what are we going to do,
Kind of like big fucking deal.
Yeah, the cow got hit by a car.
It
sucks,
happens.
but there's nothing we can do about that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of got back to the barbecue.
You just like brush her off.
Yeah.
This PETA lady just kind of...
So we're grilling, and she's just grabbing my arm, and she's hysterical. And that's when I knew, okay, maybe it's not a cow.
It's a little bit more.
It's a little bit more. Maybe there's something more with this cow.
Yeah.
So I keep trying to, get it out of her. And basically, at some point, she just was making hand signals, and she kept saying car, car, and just smashing her fists together. And so I was like, oh shit, maybe there's something more to this. So, and judging by her facial expressions, there has to be something.
She was. You could easily tell she was freaked the flock out.
Right, exactly. And so I took, and that's kind of when I knew, okay, like it's a car wreck, Mm-hmm. So I took the two people that I thought would be the most calm out of the 7. I took those two. One was he was in the Army for 8 years, and he was a corpsman, so he would be good on this expedition. Mm-hmm. And then another guy from Germany, he was an older guy. So we took him, and we drove down the road, and there was this body just in the street. No car, like just this body in the street. And I'm like, oh fuck. And we go a little closer, and then you see the car, which is this crumpled up soda can at this point. It's, beyond recognition. And then we saw another body in the rocks, just dangling, on the side of the cliff. And so we parked the car, and I remember looking back, because like on the fire truck or the ambulance back in California, it's unfortunate, but you do that shit every single day. There's always drunk drivers. There's always massive wrecks. It's nothing new. But I knew the people in the back of the car were probably scared shitless right now about what was about to happen. So I remember looking back and saying, okay, guys, you're about to see some fucked up shit, but you need to stay calm and follow me. And they got out of the car, and we went, and then right off the bat, we saw 2 more. So now we have 4 patients. It's a full-on MCI. We have to triage. We have to organize our patients in, a critical mass order. And it was really chaotic, because the police were there, the Mongolian police, and that's not really that helpful, And I just remember I went up to the first patient, and right off the bat, she was already paralyzed from the waist down. Her breathing was really diminished, and so the first thing you do is you check all 4 patients before you focus all your attention on one patient, mm-hmm. if you only have limited resources. So then I send the other 2 to go check out the other patients and tell me, come back to me and tell me what they got. And then I went to the 4th patient, who was it was just a broken arm, and he was going to be just fine. So we ignored him for the time being, because he's not my mm-hmm. concern is not with this broken arm right now. One guy, he was definitely on his last couple minutes. He was really beat up. He was ejected through the windshield, and you could see right where he went through the windshield, about 20 feet into the rocks. So then after that, we kind of went back, and he was my focus of attention for the time being. I was working on him, but then again, I have no equipment. You know, I don't have any medicine. I can't start an IV on him. I can't intubate. I'm in Mongolia, and all I have is like, a can of beans and a beer in the back of the van. It's not an ambulance. Yeah. We're not ready for this shit. And so we're doing what we can, and then the Mongolian ambulance shows up, and the doctor shows up, who I got in a huge argument with, because the things she was trying to do is not appropriate in any sense to practice on a human. Okay. Like for instance, we have this. It's a basic level of intubation. It's called an OPA, or an oral pharyngeal airway, and basically you insert that into the patient's mouth to remove the tongue from the airway so that the patient can breathe more appropriately. Okay, and what is that? It's like a tube? It's like a tube, yeah. Yep. It's similar. It's not a full intubation, but it's a very basic level, and that's what they had in Mongolia. And I said, okay, like I've used these before. Mm-hmm. So I'm watching the doctor, And there's some contraindications. You would never use this on a patient that has a gag reflex because you're putting a tube down their mouth, they're going to gag on it.
Yeah.
If they're unconscious, that's okay.
Yeah. But if they start gagging...
If they start gagging, like, it's common sense. You're not going to throw something down their throat when they're awake and looking at you.
Yeah.
So this patient...
Because they might puke.
Because they might puke and then aspirate. And, they're already... This particular patient was already paralyzed, so he can't... Or it was a woman. She can't throw up, She's going to aspirate. So the doctor goes up...
What is aspirate?
Like, to choke on your vomit.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
It just occludes the airway. So, So the doctor goes up and pulls out the OPA, or the oral pharyngeal airway, and the patient is like staring at her like, what are you about to do to me? So the patient was conscious. Ugh. And I'm like, there's no way she's going to do that right now.
Is she gonna?
Yeah, is she gonna? And she fucking, she's gonna. And she opens his mouth and puts it in, and she starts vomiting blood. And the doctor just keeps going. Like, fuck it, we're going to get this thing in there. And I'm yelling at one guy who barely speaks. He's our translator, and he's stressed out of his mind, of course. He's trying to convert English to Mongolian, which is a very complicated thing to do, on top of this, like, MCI that's happening in front of us. Ugh. And cars are zooming by. They don't care. They're, they got places to go. Fuck it, I'm not going to slow down, So it's very dangerous on the side of the road.
Horror show is occurring.
Yep. And I'm screaming at this doctor, like, pull that fucking thing out. That's not how you use that. And finally she stopped doing it, but now the patient's got blood coming down the mouth. There's blood going down the road. There's blood from the other patient that's conjoining, and now it's all mashed together. And it was just really... I don't know. Like I know it's not the West, and I know that the training is not there to our standard, back home. And that's when I was like, okay, this is gonna be bad if this is how we're starting off the incident. A couple minutes later, the ambulance comes, and it's not an ambulance. It's the same exact van that I have, only they took the back bench out, so there's no gurney. There's no and then one of the nurses draws up a morphine, the dose, it was an appropriate dose of morphine, but doesn't take vital signs beforehand, so it doesn't take the patient's blood pressure or anything. So she's just freeballing, she's just gonna administer
this,
throw that morphine. Just throw it out there, yeah.
Like,
but there are contraindications, and you need a baseline set of vitals before you start shooting people up with any sort of medication. And so that's when I was like, okay, like I don't know what to do. Like, I can't speak to the nurses or the doctors. So I guess they're gonna do their thing and hope for the best. And they ended up putting 2 patients in the back of this ambulance, and they took off. But they took the wrong patient. They took the patient with the broken arm, who was fine. But you have the lady who's paralyzed, and you have the guy who's on his last couple breaths, and you have one ambulance, and you took the guy with the broken arm who could have walked out of there. And that's when I started really yelling at them, and didn't get anywhere. The ambulance left. So the lady who was paralyzed, we had to put in like a bystander's car who just stopped on the side because there was no other ambulance coming. We're in Mongolia. We're in the middle of fucking nowhere, We're hundreds of miles from any city. And so that was the only option that the doctor on that ambulance, said, okay, well, we're going to put him in this car. And, which is the worst thing you can do for a spinal precaution patient, And, and then they took off. And then, I remember looking back, and there was like blood all over the road. There was needles on the road from the medications that were being drawn up. Mm-hmm. And then I remember thinking like how normal that was for me to see that kind of stuff. And then I looked over at the 2 people that I brought from camp, and they looked like they just stared death in the eyes. And they were freaked out, and one of the girls was crying, which is completely understandable. And then the other guy, it was like a war movie. He was just staring at nothing, and he just had this pale face, and I was like, fuck, like I feel bad that this is normal for me, and these people are just shell shocked. And so I went up and I told them, I said, guys, I know we all just saw some shit, but you know, at my fire station, we always talk about these things afterwards, and that's how we get, you know, it's like a critical incident stress debriefing that we adopted from the military, and we're going to take these tactics and we're going to apply them here. We're going to talk about how we feel, because this isn't the 1970s where it's like, oh, I'm the tough man and I'm not going to talk about my feelings, and then, you know that shit's not going to fly anymore. So we talked about it, and they were pretty shooken up, but I think it did help. And the next couple days, they started to become more talkative and kind of digest what they had seen.
Thanks for watching, and remember to check out more videos from this channel. And also, don't forget to check out the whole podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. And don't forget to like and subscribe.